Hello, everyone. It's Kathy Mills-Chang, founder and CEO of KMC University. We are delighted to offer this information relative to audits and what your audit toolkit ought to look like. I think it's very important for you to recognize the things that we're going to talk about, the steps to put in place if you do receive an audit letter, and more importantly, how you could begin doing some policing yourself to determine whether or not you might be a target specifically. We do strongly encourage you to take notes. We will provide you with the notes at the end of this, and please feel free on the live broadcast to send any of your questions. So let's start by just kind of hitting the nail on the head. What is an audit? What I believe you will learn today is that an audit is not always some very formal, organized audit. The beginnings of an audit may look very different. I'm celebrating my 35th year in chiropractic this year, and over the years of my career, I've heard it said that when a patient begins to miss appointments, it is the beginning of them dropping out of care, and it can be a leading indicator of the patient isn't engaged or following directions. In that same fashion, an audit could begin with something as simple as asking for a few records to review, and we're going to dig into that a little bit today. So the Office of Inspector General, who is kind of the police force over Medicare, CMS, has indicated that these are violations that they know from their reviews are happening. Doesn't mean they're happening with you, but they know that they're happening. Now, number two, they're submitting claims for medically unnecessary services. Essentially, that simply means that the documentation did not match what you intended it to be to bill for a service that would be treated as active treatment. But you can see there are a lot of other things here. There are incentives that may be offered. There are services in some ways provided without a license, which I think is ridiculous. I know you wouldn't do that. Falsified patient records. Now we're moving into the realm of fraud. That doesn't happen very often. And in this case, part of this report that this came from talked about billing for chiropractic services, but essentially they were charging for an adjustment and doing what might be deemed as massage instead. So all of these are things that can trigger an audit. Throughout our time together today, I'm going to talk about a very interesting case that we've had the privilege of working on, where a doctor and their clinic went through a pretty significant audit with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And over the course of what happened with them, it's very interesting how we could have sort of targeted the things that happened along the way that allowed us to identify why we might have known something was coming down the pike. So throughout our time together today, I'll refer to the real case study in the way that I'm kind of hoping you will pick up on the things not to do. The OIG clearly said that inducement violations were an area of focus that they did not, that they felt were of a concern. Well, for whatever reason, PowerPoint decided to go away. Let's see if we can figure out why. That was very interesting. Don't know why that did it, but who knows? The gods are not with me. Here we go. There you go. Now we're back. The incentives that could happen could be inducing the patient to receive care. We're familiar with a doctor recently in Iowa who was giving away electric muscle stimulation for the purpose of, in their mind, getting the patient to come in and have adjustments, which we know is probably not why the doctor was doing it. The doctor thought he was helping the patient. But these types of things, when they learn of them, could be something that is auditable. We also talk a little bit about this process of how we get ourselves into hot water. And when you think about the Medicare side of things, which many individual commercial carriers follow, you find that they begin at the top. So the OIG goes through the numbers, crunches the numbers, sees that we're spending too much money, starts to look at some things about where there could be leaky holes in the bucket, and they make their recommendations down the food chain to CMS. If you think about a totem pole, OIG's on the top, CMS is right underneath of them. All the way down at the bottom is the doctor. So after they make these recommendations, CMS simply takes them under advisement. Now, if you utilize the terminology, "You are not the boss of me," OIG could, be ignored because CMS doesn't have to take their recommendations. They want them to, but they're peers. So in essence, what you want is for them to listen and to take and heed the advice. So after they take them under advisement, they either do or don't put pressure down the food chain on the Medicare administrative contractors that you recognize as your carriers. And those carriers then have to do certain things. For example, when they found that doctors were overbilling or there was a high percentage of 98941s being billed, which are the 3 to 4 region adjustments, then they decided that they were going to ask the carriers to do targeted reviews, to randomly ask for notes to confirm that there were indeed 8 diagnosis codes and 3 areas truly documented and that they were included in the plan. Then the MACs audit and put pressure downward on the providers in this very way. And unfortunately, what has been a pattern is that providers don't always heed the advice and show the improvements necessary to kind of get them off of our back. This is a very funky situation that was reported recently in an Office of Inspector General portfolio about a doctor that it started very simply. "Hey, send us your records," just like it always does. But under this circumstance, the doctor said, "Hey, sorry, but these records and only these records were in my car, and my car got stolen, and somebody broke in, and so I can't do this." Well, of course, they said, "Really?" And they went ahead and said, "Let's do a fraud investigation because something isn't right." And so the next step was to interview the patients. They found out that most of them got what they deemed a massage. There was a driver of some kind that picked them up and brought them to appointments, and this driver essentially also somehow did these soft massages. You can see how it just completely rolls downhill from here. This doctor is an extreme case, but it's because of not behaving properly on the front end of an audit. Well, this doctor knew he was probably not going to come out smelling like a rose, so he did what he thought he had to do. Unfortunately, he's now in the pokey and he's serving time and having to pay money back and all kinds of things. This is not the certainly everyday doctor that we deal with. I want to be sure you know that. But every so often, the OIG does actually do a review of a chiropractor and makes them an example. Obviously, if you're our client, you hear this from us all the time. The way that you protect yourself is by having the policies and procedures of an OIG compliance program installed so that at least they know you're doing the best that you can. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So typically how an audit begins is how a patient begins to drop out of care, just a missed appointment here and there. So it's just a few charts or just a few visits. And it's what they would consider to be a representative sample. 99 times out of 100, and I'm going to tell you that in 35 years in chiropractic and probably a majority of that, although as I age, it's probably not a majority. So let's say, out of maybe 20 years active, it wasn't until 15 years in that I realized when we got a records request, it was more than a records request. Because if we fumble the ball with what we send back first to put the kibosh on, "You don't need to bother us, we're not the George you're looking for," a whole series of events can happen from there. So we're going to talk a little bit today about why when you get that first record request, certainly our clients are very well aware of the way that we urge them to behave. There are some absolutely mandatory things that you do to be able to put your best foot forward when they get that answer. That is what we'll talk about as we go, because you're going to hear nothing for a while. I get doctors all the time that'll say, "They asked for records and, they didn't do anything, and what should I do?" And unfortunately, you may hear nothing. And you may hear nothing because, kablam is about to come. But very often you hear nothing because they're like, "Yeah, leave them alone. They're doing okay." You're not going to get the nicey-gram. You will only usually get the nasty-gram. And you have every right, particularly as a preferred provider in a network, to follow up and get an answer when something's been sent in. Do not think that no news is automatically good news. Give them a reasonable time to do it. But what we've learned is that a lot of these reviewers are doing mandatory random reviews and they're overwhelmed. So don't worry about it. Maybe after 90 to 120 days, you're going to, lo and behold, get something. And if not, I suggest you call them, because if it is the kablam that you're going to get, you're getting audited. And that means they're going to go on. So in this representative sample kind of case study that I'm going to tell you about as we go through the day today, this particular office, we tracked back to where this began, was with 5 patients and several dates of service on each patient. Now, had we been able to be involved on the front end, as we often are, and we hope that we are for you, we might have recognized that in this particular instance, the 5 patients all tended to be with the same type of treatment. This is a carrier that happened to cover acupuncture and as well as other services. And in this particular case, the acupuncture was on each one of the bills. So had we been working with this office at that time, we might have been able to go, hey, before we send this in, let's take a deeper dive into what they might be looking for. So just keep in mind that's kind of where it started. And indeed, this office got audited because now this is where they ask for it all. And you can see here, this was a year's worth of service. It was, in this case, all of the basics. They're not asking for too many things as you go down into it based on the type of practice that it was. But this is where they're going to say, now I want to see 55 patient files, and I want to see everything in those files. And that's when we have the sphincter tightening experience that usually is what's going on here. I would like to suggest that at this point you keep calm and sing Soft Kitty, or that you keep calm and you say, you know, Kitty, help me, and call us to help you, because we like to get involved on the front side and alleviate issues. But it's going to be scary when you get to this point. Let's talk now about the things that you can do when you get that request to be sure that you're in good shape. So when that first records request comes along and you get the simple five patient or 5 visit request, the first thing that you may wonder is why you? And there's a lot of reasons why it could be. What we learned in this particular case study on this particular audit that we got involved in, which we do a lot of them all the time because people do heed our advice. Call us if you get this. Please let us help you before you just randomly mail stuff back. I was very sad to report that a client of ours who was our client got a Medicaid audit, was told that they needed to pay $57,000 by a certain date, and so they just did, and they never told us, and we never heard about it until after the case. And then, of course, it went bad after that because they saw, you know, now the doctor's kind of being honest about, well, yeah, maybe I was wrong, so here's your money, especially when you send it in 24 hours. And then on top of that, Medicaid and the state reported them to the federal OIG, and thank goodness we got involved by that time. But what I can tell you is that you're probably singled out, if it feels like a singled out, for a reason, and that professional eyes can look at that very often and help see maybe why that is, which is why we beg you to help us help you early. So it could be that they're looking for payment recovery or recoupment. Somebody from, you know, the corporate office is putting the pedal to the metal and saying, we're paying out too much, let's go find some to recoup. Could be that there were overpayments that have been happening and they've been auditing others and finding that they're letting some things fall through the cracks, such as what OIG did with the 98941. When they did a review and they found that 70+% of 98941s were inappropriately documented and shouldn't have been paid because they looked at them after the fact, now they said, well, maybe we need to start looking at them before the fact. And those of you in the Noridian area know what that was like. So you can see that there could be things that happen, but the last bullet is a big one, which is the pattern. And if they see a pattern, so we're going to show you how you can look for your own patterns and know what they're seeing so that you could perhaps through the general everyday course of your own OIG compliance program and your internal compliance auditing, you will be able to perhaps recognize these things as well. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to breathe. It's probably not if you're going to be audited, it's when, and you have to kind of roll with it and know that it's just part of the business of your practice. Medicare, for example, has a federal mandate to do what are called comprehensive error rate testing reviews, and they have to do so many. So I would easily expect that 75% of our profession could expect to be audited. Now, it's just like the IRS. Nobody wants to be audited, but I will tell you that knockity knock, knock, knock. I've never been audited by the IRS, but if I am, I'm not going to flip out because I know the care that we take to do things appropriately, to pay appropriate professionals to do our taxes. I would never try to do my own taxes. I'm not an idiot. And I can't follow all those rules. I pay someone who knows the rules. It's like people pay us because we know the rules. What's important to understand is that I may be at their mercy once I am audited. But if I can show that I've done every possible thing that I can do and I have appropriate receipts and appropriate documentation, chances are that they're going to look at me a little bit differently than somebody that walks in to that audit and dumps out, a plastic bag full of crumbled up receipts. There's a different way that you can behave when you're audited that allows the third party to look at you differently. And that's what I'd like to help you kind of understand. So after you've panicked, ask yourself these questions. Why would they be asking for these particular records? What could I learn about this? If it's Blue Cross Blue Shield in your state and they're asking for all different kinds of records, that may just tell you that it's random. In the case of this case study that I'm talking about, each one of the patients happened to have had acupuncture, in which case not everybody in the practice got acupuncture. So that might be just a little bit of a clue. So we want to look first and see what we can learn about. So I might then go back and look at these 5 patients' records and say, what did this billing look like? Oh, holy cow, every one of these new patients had a 99204. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, that's a pattern. And it's unusual to be at an 04 in the first place for a chiropractor. And then beyond that, for every patient out of the sample to be at that probably is a factor that we need to be aware of. So again, if I'm going to be audited by the IRS, I want to know everything I could possibly know about what they may be thinking. So I want to be as up to speed as they are before I go to bat. I want to look at the coding, such as the E&M services, or in this case, oh, everybody had acupuncture, or oh my goodness, everybody had 6 units of massage, or whatever that might be. What are the things that could potentially be an outlier? One of the things we do hope that people understand, even if you're not our client, is you could buy a half an hour of our time or an hour of our time randomly. You could send in what you have and let us look at it because we are certified auditors. So we're going to look at it and go, here's what we think. Now, I'm trying to teach you what to do here, but just know that probably we're going to pick up on something in 15 seconds before somebody who's not as experienced as we are would see. You also want to know if you've sent them anything yet. And if you're up to the point where you're getting the 55 or 60 chart request, did we send them the 5? That's what we want to know first. What do they have? Could there be external factors, such as CMS told everybody in 11 states of Noridian that they're going to get 98941s looked at? So it's everybody, it's not just me. That's something I need to know. And probably most importantly, the last question I would ask is, where's that number for KMC University? Because I am not even close to kidding you. The high percentage of people who do have us look it over, help them prepare the right foot forward, not the upside down package of crumbled up receipts, but the beautiful banker's box full of order, it makes a difference. And I'm going to tell you what a difference this makes very, very soon. So let's think about what might be the trigger once we're now looking. Could it be overutilization? Well, holy cow, my box 14 date is August of 19, 1999, or worse, yet it's August of 2017 and I've been treating this patient once a month ever since then and billing. Well, I can tell you right now that's a pattern that will be absolutely captured. Unspecified codes, the 97039s, the 97139s, things that don't make general sense in a typical practice. Maybe unusual types of errors or unusual codes. In the case of what we've learned on this particular case study, the audit was triggered by 3 different patients who complained. Now that's unusual, frankly, but that happened to be the trigger. And it also may just be that it was your turn and your number came up and there's not much you can do. Here's an example of what Medicare might see that looks fishy. And even though this is from a doctor that was in California, Dr. Deep, who had a $700,000 recoupment. This happened, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But this was in the report. So we can see here that 82% of his adjustment codes were billed as 98942. Doctors, that is a pattern. It's a pattern because he thought he was a full spine adjuster and was therefore billing all of these. Of course I have to bill every area. But then, of course, the documentation did not match because it is extraordinarily difficult and labor intensive to document that and to document the medically necessary regions versus the clinically appropriate reasons. Now, as you can see here, and what was said in this report, my guess is Dr. Deep is a good doctor who cares about his patients, who billed 98942 because he thought that's what he was supposed to do because he adjusted the full spine. But when you look at it from the eyes of an auditor, guess what? He was getting almost double the amount of money for the 98942 as he would have for a 98940. So in the eyes of those who are suspicious, it makes it look like you're billing the highest code simply to make more money. This happens to medical doctors who have high patterns of 99205 or 99215, where there's no care taken to really properly code. And in fact, I'm just coding to make the most money. So it could look fishy on that side. And if you find that your percentages are that way with this carrier, then that's something to take heed to. So let's talk about how to get out on the right foot, be a ninja with your record requests. And I think that every person who deals with records in the office, it needs to be aware of this information. And as we say with all things, please, please, please begin step 1 by knowing the rules of the carrier that you're billing in the first place. This is an example of what Railroad Medicare would like to see. Likewise, if I'm dealing with Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna or whatever those things are, they are going to have what's called a medical review policy that is on their website that will refer to chiropractic treatment or physical therapy treatment or other things that you may do in the practice. It is just part of the doing business of your practice that you understand over on this business side of the world. If I'm going to deal with that or I'm going to deal with somebody like that, I've got to know their rules. It's tantamount to sitting down with $100,000 in your pocket, which is a lot of money, at a blackjack table and having no idea how to play blackjack. Well, maybe I'll just figure it out as I go here. And you're hitting on 20, right? That's not what you do. And unfortunately, what's happening is that our new graduates, even doctors who have been associates who are now off in their own practice, don't understand that you have a 2-part job. You have a clinical job, and then you have a business job. And this piece alone refers to your business part of your job. I'm going to show you an example of Aetna insurance. So Aetna is one of the most restrictive chiropractic medical review policies that are out there. You can find this right on their website. You can see this was from last year, and it was reviewed again on 4/12. But I want to show you what you may not know about this carrier. So they consider the following alternative medicine interventions experimental and investigational, and therefore not covered. So if we use the single example, I'm going to just put these up here very slowly, and you can look at some things in the list that may be things that you do. So a big one on this particular section is ART, or active release technique. Not going to be paid. Craniosacral therapy, big one. Cupping, if you do massage and you bill for massage and it happens to be cupping, nope. Feldenkrais is actually a part of the definition of neuromuscular reeducation according to the AMA. And if your therapist is performing this and it's Aetna, don't bill massage for it because it's not covered. Graston technique will cause a lot of sphincters to tighten here because it is a very common and very effective treatment. But if you're doing this and it's Aetna, it's not going to be paid for. And guess what? How would they know, right? You're billing, say, 97140. They're not going to know until such time as you have the, you have the audit. And then your record says, I did Graston technique, and they go, whoop, I need all that money back. Muscle testing here. I mean, if you do muscle testing as a part of your evaluation, there are ways that you can document that you're not separately billing for it. So this is not that big of a hairy deal. NUCA is a big one. I work very closely with ChiroSecure Malpractice, and they have a lot of people that do this particular procedure. United Healthcare last month came out and updated their chiropractic review policy, and in it they talked about the specifics of no longer covering headaches because they considered headaches to be neurological headaches. Yet in their policy on headaches in a different part of their website, it said that they cover cervicogenic headaches. So it was immediately a problem, and one of their insureds wrote to them and said, hey, what about this NUCA? Why is that here? Well, unfortunately, NUCA has been in their no coverage for years and years. The doctor had just never read it before. So it's critical that you stay attached to someone, your state association, someone like us, who can let you know when these policies change. We put that in the payer update section of our library, and our clients are immediately told to go check that out. Whole body vibration and the wobble chair are kind of really big things that a lot of doctors are doing. If you are placing someone on a vibration plate and they are doing therapeutic exercises, actual exercises, in an unstable environment, that is simply exercises that you happen to have them on a plate. So the exercise is okay to bill. You would not bill separately or additionally for the fact that I'm standing on a vibration plate. When we take a deeper dive into the look and feel of their policy here on ART, we can see here that there's, it's mumbo jumbo. They really, quite frankly, is not, I don't think they do a good job with this. And if you notice, there's one study that they're basing this on from clear back in 2004. And I hope that the ART people will get on the stick and begin fighting these and providing the updated research that I know they have to be able to get some of these silly things taken care of. All right, so assuming that we are proactive in this bottom line and we have looked at medical review policy, that's a big factor. We understand what's going on with that. The next piece here is to make sure that record request gets into the proper hands. And I mean, no disrespect to anyone here. I was a CA and consider myself to still be a CA. But frankly, if you have not been properly trained in how to do this and you're trying to help your doctor, it's the blind leading the blind sometimes, and I mean that with all the love in my heart. You don't have to know everything, but you do need to know where to get answers. And this is where I strongly recommend that it's okay to ask for help. And we get, thank goodness, so many phone calls from people that say, hey, I was at a seminar and you said if we ever got a request, let us sell you half an hour time and work through this with you. You may or may not need more help than that 30 minutes, but at least you're getting an expert professional opinion. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know someone who does. The next thing is to really closely review the record request. Pay close attention to the information that's requested. Make sure it's reasonable. Does it meet HIPAA guidelines? It's part of TPO or treatment payment healthcare operations if it is a request regarding the patient's records and you've been given permission to bill. But when they go beyond certain things, it could violate outside of TPO, so you need to look really closely. Make sure that the patient has not signed one of your protected health information restrictions and said you can never share XYZ with the insurance. And keep in mind, if that were the case, you probably were not billing them. So this would be a little more unusual. And really, what are the dates of service? The thing that I find most doctors are very surprised about when you get a record request is it's okay to ask for an extension, because what will often happen is they'll get this request, it sits on Sally's desk, then it sits on the doctor's desk, and somebody looks at it and goes, "Holy Toledo, this is due tomorrow," and they call us. Well, the very first thing to do is to call and say, "We blew it. We didn't see this. Life happened. We were very busy. I'm so incredibly sorry. I need an extension." And I'm going to tell you that in every case that I can remember, the extension has been authorized, because you're not asking for something crazy. Don't ask for 2 months, ask for 2 weeks. And then that gives us the time we need to put something together. Unless there's something funky going on, you should not receive any ugliness from the carrier. They will usually allow that to happen. The next step is to gather the documentation that is being requested. It needs to be reviewed by somebody who knows what they're looking at. And it's a little bit like going nose blind, how that commercial is about that kid's room and it stinks until they put the Febreze in there. He doesn't know he's in there all the time. Your doctors may not know if their documentation is great or not great because they look at it all the time and they're doing the best they can. This is where the value really comes in having somebody else take a peek before it's going to be sent in. So in this case of the case study I'm sharing with you, after the 5 records were sent in, they almost immediately got a review for more than 50 charts. And thankfully at that time they called and said, "Holy cow." And it was an all hands on deck, because more than 80% of this doctor's practice was Blue Cross. If this went south, it would be earth-shattering for this practice. And we knew that we had to get this right the first time. We had to. And they invested, and they flew us out there. We did on-site days. We went through every chart with them. As you'll see in a moment, we created case summaries. We prepared the records in a way that was amazing, and made it so that they were going to be able to hand deliver, because it was so many charts, this banker's box, 2 banker's boxes full of materials. And it worked, and I'll tell you why. But remember that you can't go back and change the records after the fact, but you are absolutely able to add dated addenda. So if there's something that you believe was missed and you can add it with today's date, that's allowed to be done. They can choose to accept it or not. That's up to them. Make sure your documentation really does a good job of explaining episodic care. If the patient truly has not had a great deal of progress, explain why. By now, it may be obvious as to why you got audited, and if those are the things, there's some place that now we just need to mitigate danger and do the best we can to go forward. So the next thing is to organize the materials as best you can. To organize it with oldest date first, organized by episode of care, in a chronology of the patient's story that's easy to follow. Hopefully what we find is that they ask for everything from the last year, and the patient really did have 3 different episodes of care last year with beginnings, middles, and ends. They were discharged, they had maintenance in between, and came back with a new one. That's the ideal situation. And I recognize that your stories may not be that clean, but as much as we possibly can, we need to tell that story in the case summary. Episodes of care, again, and the organization of the initial visit through the daily visits and all the way down through discharge, if any, needs to be managed and needs to be put in an order. When it's a big mamma jamma like the 50 plus charts, let's put a piece of colored copy paper in between each one with a note, so that we're doing our best to help an auditor who may have a bias, who may not really understand chiropractic, lots of maybes, able to really look at that information and make sense of it, so that we're helping them to help us. This to me is the most important thing about a records request, and that is to tell the story with a case summary. I have being honest, I've had experiences both positive and negative with this. We've worked on 2 very high profile, very big cases where they were, hundreds of charts, in this case, the more than 50 charts. And it has been the summaries that made the success story happen. There have been other times where doctors have said, hey, I did what you told me to do, and they just got mad at me and threw them away. Well, I didn't see them, so I can't promise they were exactly as I would have had you do them. And an insurance company certainly doesn't have to take this for granted. We're trying to help them make their life a little bit easier. So imagine the records are oldest to newest, and we place this kind of story on top. And there's a cover letter that it sort of goes on top of each one with high points. This is an example of the template we have in our library for our members to use that kind of explains, you'll kind of get the idea, but it kind of just explains the story. Hey, this current episode of care started here. It's active treatment because of this. These are the diagnosis codes, whatever that may be. Here's the treatment plan. And then we go on to kind of explain, here's what we did, here's how they got better, here's what happened. Now, if there are many different episodes of care that are being requested of information here, then we need to tell that whole story. We might synopsize the older ones. Patient came in originally on this date, treated 12 visits until this date, was discharged. Patient returned here, was treated here, and was discharged. Our number one thing that we find is that this episodic care is not clear in your documentation. There is not a clear delineation for somebody reading the notes to understand your case management. And when that's missing, it's very difficult for an auditor to make sense of what's going on. So we can sort of retrofit that with this case summary to help them see what may be difficult to see. We're not changing anything, but we're elaborating or putting lipstick on the pig, as I like to say sometimes. The next step is to pull it all together and check your work. This is where you have everything in order, everything in place, all the information that you need to have for every one of the charts that's been requested, that you can sign your work with excellence and feel like this is the best possible thing that you can put forward. It is very often at this time that we get involved. If the doctors kind of come up front with, this is what I'm doing, we say, okay, go do this, and then send it to us first. This is where we get involved. But I want to just make a special note for everyone here. I don't care if I am your CA. With my 35 years of experience in certifications and knowledge, the doctor still has to be the last one to okay this before it goes in the mail. The reason why is because nobody but the doctor is going to have their fanny on the hot seat, right? So the doctor has to be the one to know. Now, again, in my world, I wish everybody would send their stuff to us. We'd look at it. We'd try to help them or identify what's going on. And I would love for one of our specialists to be your partner in looking at that if and when there's ever a circumstance like that. The very last piece that I would say is important to know is that you have your policy and procedure in place to govern your practice. And assuming you have your mandatory required OIG compliance program, all of your HIPAA in place for things like this, then one thing you are going to want to do is have your medical records request policy and procedure in place. This is an example of the sample policy that's a part of our library and a part of our training programs, particularly with the OIG, that kind of help you. We do it where we give you 80% of the words and you just personalize it for yourself, because really this now is something that allows you to follow a guideline in what you're doing. Likewise, you should have procedure that anybody in the practice can follow when a records request comes in. This is an example, of just something that we work with folks on, and this is an example of maybe what a final might look like. So we have details of what happens when the requests come in. Doesn't get buried on the desk. It goes in a special place. How you gather the information together and put things in place. How you prepare the information before it's going to go out. Because remember, the policy and procedure is what they keep telling us over and over and over and over and over again that we have to have. And if you don't have that, you're now in violation as of 2010 of Obamacare, because it says that if particularly if you're a Medicare provider, these things need to be in place. So these are not hard things, but often what we find in chiropractic offices is that we have to go back and retrofit things that should have been done. For anyone that works with us or has been around these webinars or us, in the 12 years that we've been in business, I have some really exciting news to share. And I thought this would be the first time that I'd like to share it. And that is that after 18 months of not having any, we've got a hands-on lab on the calendar. October 20th and 21st, we will be having our special 2-day workshop here in Denver. And its focus is going to be coding and billing compliance. Essentially, send us your biller and let us train them. That's what it boils down to in a weekend. And we are not taking registrations yet. We'd love you to save the date. But I wanted to give you an opportunity. Certainly if you're our client, there are discounts or no charge for you to attend. But I want to launch a poll just so that you have the opportunity to say, hey, let me know when that's ready. So I'm going to launch this poll, and it's going to pop up on your screen. Doesn't matter to me whether you like it or don't. I just want an easy way for people to say, give me a shout. We'd love to hear more about it. And then once we get everything up and going, we can absolutely contact you and say, registration's open. And I say this not for any reason other than it's the truth. This will sell out. We only have a limited amount of people. I think the max in our room, in order to keep it hands-on workshop-y, we can't have 500 people there. It has to be a small group because we work with you one-on-one. And what's important to know is it will sell out. So the early bird pricing will be published. You can go kmcuniversity.com/hands-on-lab, and that's going to be fantastic. So 62% of you have voted. Give me 15 more seconds. Somebody vote so that I can move on because I want to get this completed. Again, don't care if you say no. I just want everybody to have a chance. Thank you. Keep going. Keep going. Good, 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 good. Awesome. And we're off. So I'm going to close this poll, and we will continue on from here and talk about the next step. There's our poll. All right. So let's close today by talking a little bit about the things that you can do to put that bubble wrap around you, the bulletproof vest on, the things to happen. Just like I said before, audits are often random. It might happen anyway. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that it could happen. So let's begin by just kind of going, what now? Well, I think the most important thing that you have to understand is it might very well just be your turn. So the first thing that I would like to encourage you to consider is it might be your turn. Don't get down on yourself. Don't get down on insurance. Don't get down on the profession. Just know that somebody else is being asked to pay your bill. They have every right to ask questions before they pay it. And hopefully you're doing what you're supposed to do so that when they do look at it, they go, yep, not the droid, keep going. If there is one thing in your documentation that can make a difference in your life, and why we harp on it to the level that we do, is to master the idea of case management and episodic care. If you think about it, other than if you're a complete 100% wellness practice, you're not billing insurance anyway, so let's be honest, none of this would matter and you wouldn't even be on this call. But ideally, if you understand that every bit of your patient's care is either active or not active, they're in an active episode of care or they're not, and when they are, we ought to be able to bill insurance for it, and when they're not, the patient should pay out of Hip Pocket National Bank, and they should pay cash. So episodes begin with new histories, making sure we understand their functional deficits, do an exam that quantifies that history and reflects an appropriate diagnosis that is now going to be tied together with a treatment plan. That is the baseline initial visit of an episode of care. We then treat with routine visits. Those are the quick and easy ones. If it goes too long, we do a re-exam. If it doesn't, we discharge. But there is an end point to the active portion of treatment. The patient's functions cannot improve anymore. They may still have subluxations. That's how it works. but those are things that the insurance expects the patient to cover for themselves. Our Medicare decision-making matrix is one of the best tools ever. It allows you to really walk through whether something should be active or maintenance. This is a part of our Medicare quick reference tool. It also is a part of our library for those of you that are members there. I think one of the most important things you can do is to keep track of the active number of visits within an episode. This is an example of bullet touch macros. When I helped to design those with ChiroTouch, we actually put this in like 3 years ago, and this year now Medicare is actually requesting that you put the number on there. So we were way ahead of the game. But it's important to be clear that you know, hey, this is what I'm thinking on this episode, and there's going to be an end to this eventually, not forever. The next thing that you can do is to conduct internal audits. I believe that there is nothing more effective for the business side of your practice than self-policing. And there are many different kinds of audits that go along with that. One of the very first and most important ones is to conduct regularly scheduled documentation audits. When you consider that you probably, like in our compliance program, we recommend that you yank, like 4 individual dates of service a month, audit them, keep track of your error rate. When there's something wrong with it, go forward and fix those things. Continue to self-audit. Again, when you're showing up at that auditor's office and they're talking about these things, and you can show, like my case study did, when they showed up there to say, look, what these patient complaints were about, we actually had already found that. Not sure if you knew this, but we've already refunded. We've already fixed it. Here are the correction notices that went to all of our staff. Now we continuously make a new policy where we audit any acupuncture claims. The coder looks at them again before they go to billing. These are the things we put in place already before you even started looking at us. And can I tell you, the auditor's mouth hit the floor, because clearly this is not that droid they're looking for, right? They had already done these things. And when you can safely say, hey, I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do to run my business, they know that you're probably not where they want to waste a lot of time. Honestly, if you've never had anybody look at your notes, we offer a wonderful analysis service called a 3-chart review. It is performed by a certified specialist who is a specialist in chiropractic documentation. We review them. We provide you with a easily 10 to 15 page report with exact examples of what's good and bad. We do a live online report of findings in addition to the written report, and we outline the things that you need to do to improve that. It's one of our more popular services because we call it like a white hat audit or a safe environment audit, like we're the good guys, right? So it's summertime and I've evidently lost my mind, my staff told me. So we're taking $150 off of our normal cost down to only $549 through the end of July. We have a lot of people that say, I really want this done. It's not my budget. Could I pay half? Send you the records, and then before I get my report, in several weeks, pay the other half. We're happy to work with you on that. I hope that you'll give us a shout and that you'll visit with this and take advantage of this very, very nice offer. The next type of audit that we will do for you in that review, but also you should be doing on your own, is a periodic E&M auditing for accuracy. So looking through the evaluation and management guidelines for initial and routine E&M visits and making sure that your coding is accurate. That should be something you do proactively. Obviously, there are different rules and regulations you have to understand to be sure you've gotten to the right code. I also recommend that you randomly review EOBs or explanations of benefits on a monthly basis. And oh, by the way, these are all things that are a part of your compliance program anyway. So if you're doing a proper compliance program, they're going to already be in place. Just randomly select a handful of payments every month, go through them, look at patterns, look at denials, look at things that, is the staff properly appealing, or are they writing things off incorrectly? These patterns are things that could expose you to an audit that you can be proactively engaged in. One of the most important things that you can do is to look at your coding. This is an example of part of our practice performance profile, but you can easily do this yourself. all the codes you bill, for every month that you go into your software and find out how many of each you did. This is just the CMTs. Here's an example of a doctor that found out that almost 86% of the time they're billing 98941. So if they know that, now they can proactively go, the insurance company knows that too. So let me randomly pull half a dozen, 2 dozen charts and audit my 98940s to be sure, I'm sorry, 41s, to be sure that the documentation exists for what needs to happen to bill 98941, because there's a lot that needs to go into that, not only on a day-to-day basis, but also in your initial evaluation. So you can see how if you just know these business-related things, it allows you to put that bubble wrap around yourself. And if you need help with a coding audit, we do them too. Gather the data, we'll run it down for you. I also think it's really important for you to make sure that your staff is trained. I say this because I are one, but I can tell you that as a chiropractic assistant, all that I ever wanted to do was protect my doctor. All that I ever wanted to do was make his life easier or her life easier in the case of all the places I worked, because I knew what they were doing for our patients. And the more that I could take off of their plate, the more people they could help. So vicariously, I was helping these people. And maybe it's the same attitude that we've carried forward into our core values at KMC University. But if your staff is not trained, if you haven't invested in them to help them be able to do everything that we're talking about here, then it's almost like a -1 instead of what could be a +5. Because when your staff is trained, that's extra eyes, extra ears, making sure to not only protect your fanny, but also to make sure that under these circumstances, we are proactively looking for things that will allow us, honestly, just to be safer. So I encourage that. If you have specific questions about this, I encourage you to email info@kmcuniversity.com. If you would like some specific information about our hands-on lab or the special on the 3-chart review, or even what membership in our library means, and if you qualify for one of the offers that we have for only $49 for the first month instead of $99, recognize that the majority of our programs have no commitment, no long-term commitment at all. You can come and go as you please. With 30 days notice, you can leave the library. There's no requirement to be around for 8 years. So I hope that's something that makes sense to you. And while I'm reviewing the questions to begin answering them, allow me to just once again share another poll, a different poll, even if it is not something that has to do with the hands-on lab specifically. But if we can contact you to give you perhaps a little 10-minute demo of where all this material is housed, I'm very, very proud to say that the compendium of material in our library is the largest compendium of training available in the entire profession in these topic areas, even more than you would ever see at any chiropractic college, even more than your national or state associations have. So we're very proud of that, and we always try to share with them as well and help them get the word out to their folks. But I do want you to know that we're very proud of the material we have, of the standing we have in this profession, of our absolutely pristine reputation in this way. And if you need help in these kinds of areas, I hope that you'll look to us, because we really do know what we're doing, and we really are here as a core value of our company to help you. And I'm going to leave this on for just another minute or so while I am answering a couple of these questions. So Linda, we have not particularly applied for CEU credit for AAPC. We generally don't. But if you feel like it's something you can submit, I encourage you to reach out, and we will be more than happy to provide something for you to be able to turn in to show that you were here and to get credit for that. The slides will be available as well as the recording. Give us probably 24 hours and you will receive an email to the address that you registered with that will have a link to the notes, a link to the recording, and a couple of other little free goodies that I'm happy to put there. I am going to share with you, because I want to, the case summary template for you to download. It is something that I feel the more we can get out there, the better. I still think that you probably would need some help making sure that it's all right, and I hope that you would look to us for that help. But please watch for that email so that you can share that information. And if this webinar is not for our members, this webinar was for the public. So you will absolutely be able to get the email that will have the information to come back and watch this again. So this is not a member webinar. All of those member webinars, and again, the literally thousands of resources that are in our library, video and otherwise, are the ones that are available to our members. Where do you find information on the payer's website for the medical review policy? So generally what I do is Google. And just go to Google, and let's pretend that you're in Texas. And in Texas, we need Texas Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we go and we look that up and we say, Texas chiropractic medical review policy, Blue Cross Blue Shield. You will generally be taken to a medical review policy or medical policy area of the website. From there, you can research by code, you can research by topic. I would also look at physical therapy if you do things other than adjust. Let me close today by telling you what happened to the office with the 50+ things. We went there. The doctor invested. It was such a big deal that 2 of us went, and the doctor really invested to make that happen. We spent the equivalent of 4 days on site and the equivalent of all the time that we had to do otherwise. The recoupment request was going to be about just under $200,000 based on what they had extrapolated and figured out that they needed. The auditor told the doctor that because of the professional way in which the records were provided, the clear example that they had a compliance program in place, they were working the compliance program, they had found themselves this error before the insurance did and were already fixing it. All $194,000+ went away, and the doctor had a 0 recoupment. Can you imagine the disaster it would have been if they had haphazardly returned that information or not been proactive in self-auditing or any of those kinds of things? It would have been a disaster. They could have even been kicked out of their Blue Cross Blue Shield. So I hope you know that we provide this information lovingly in hope that it helps to buoy up the business side of your practice. And we're always here to help. Thank you for being a member of our webinar today. Watch for the email. And don't hesitate to reach out if we can help you. Watch for the email and it'll give you everything you need to know. Have a great one. Bye-bye.